Welcome to Emsi webinars. For today's economic development webinar, we're going to be introducing our regional response tool. I should probably also introduce myself. I'm Will Cookson, I'm the Director for Economic Development, and I'd also like to introduce Martin Gerard, who's our Account Director within Emsi UK for our economic development customers.
Hello there.
So I'm just going to quickly run through the agenda. We will introduce Emsi for those of you that don't know us. I'm going to share some of the latest and most up-to-date insight that we have in regards to understanding the impact of COVID-19. We're then going to explore the regional response tool. We will provide an update on where we're going with that tool, and then we will point you towards further resources that could be useful. So for those of you who don't know us already, Emsi's mission is to use labour market data to help inform, connect people within the worlds of education and employment, and help people make better decisions in regards to the world of work, obviously within the context of regional and local economies. In summary, I thought it'd be useful just to share the types of insight that we provide. On this screen, you can see labour market information, which is essentially structural government data, which we model into a proprietary data set. Big data in terms of job posting analytics and profile analytics. Profile analytics being people's online profiles that they create when looking for work, and then Emsi skills, which is a new skills taxonomy that we're developing to better understand careers and also jobs. We work primarily within the world of education to support with skills planning. We work with economic development organisations to help them with regional planning, and we work directly with employers and employment organisations to help with their planning in regards to understanding the local labour market. So the goals for this session in regards to what we're looking to cover, we'll provide an update on labour market information. We will then look at the regional response tool, and I will then point you towards further resources that could be useful. Now, if you do have any questions as we're going through this, do use the panel on the left-hand side to raise any questions, and we'll do our best to answer them either now or as a follow-up. All of the slides that we see will be shared with you. So in terms of COVID-19 insight, in terms of hiring activity, in terms of this, we're obviously looking at job postings data here. It continued to increase in August, which was great to see. We'd seen an increase in July as well. Total job postings were up to 1.10 million in the first week of August, and lots of new job postings, really the highest numbers that we've seen since the crisis began. And job postings grow in all but 5 unitary authority areas in early August. So we're seeing consistent growth across the UK. Strong rises in job adverts for gardeners, debt collectors, construction, and it seems to be fairly consistent. Obviously, the thing to bear in mind is there will be a backlog of job postings that weren't made during lockdown. So we'd expect to see now that lockdown has eased up, we'd expect to see an uptake in regards to recruitment activity. But this continues to show us hints of positivity. At its highest, you can see that, and this, what we've done here is we've looked at the top 25 occupations over the last 30 days up to the 31st of August, and this is for 2-digit standard occupation classifications. At the highest, you can see there we're just up to 28%. When we last looked at these figures in our webinar in July, I think the highest we got to was 18%. We're continuing to see similar occupations where the increase is, and then what we're seeing right at the far end is we're down slightly in regards to teaching and education professionals and secretarial roles. But what we're seeing is positive. We're seeing an increase on where we were, and we hope that continues to be the case. Job postings are obviously key to understanding what's happening immediately in the labour market. The other source of data that we're using is in regards to claimant counts. Now, in their entirety, claimant counts, they're very important to us because they can give us Jobseeker's allowance claimant count data, and that's coded not only just by geographic location, but also by the occupation they most recently worked in. They're also considered to be the closest to the labour market. They would have tended to have had strong work history. They've made sufficient national insurance contributions in prior tax years. There are limitations to Jobseeker's allowance. It doesn't give the full picture. Over in the left-hand column here, you can see the full picture. You can see the full claimant count numbers, which would include universal credit. One of the challenges with universal credit is not all of the people receiving universal credit will be necessarily seeking work, and they won't necessarily be out of work. They could be in low income roles. So looking at those larger figures around claimant counts, really the interesting thing is we saw a dip in from May to June. We've seen a slight increase through till July, but nothing like the increases we were seeing in March, April and May. And currently we're 107% up on where we were if we were to look back at that period up to February. So large increases, but they're not continuing at the rate that they were in April and May, thankfully. So yes, I mean, the only thing to mention here, and I'd like to point you towards a resource that we have on our blog. You can look at claimant counts for your local area down to local authority area, and you can track that back to January and see how that changes month on month. The important thing to mention here is that we're tending to see a pattern with urban areas seeing the larger increases in regards to claimant counts. And as I mentioned, there was a fall in claimant counts in June, and the numbers have risen again from 72,500 up to 90.5 million even. Thousand, sorry. So those are the increases that we've seen. I also want to talk a bit about the furloughing scheme and what this can tell us. These are special statistics created and published in response to the coronavirus job retention scheme. Doesn't equate to unemployment. It could hint at the worst case scenario, but it could also give hints on where we are seeing recovery. If people are coming off the furloughing scheme, they may be going back into employment. This data will cease with the conclusion of the scheme. The data that we're looking at here shows that actually the numbers have dropped, as you would imagine, and obviously the highest level of take-up was when the scheme was first launched back in April. We can also look at who is returning from furlough and at what rate. Construction, when we've looked at this, construction is at the top of the chart that we're looking at here, with 318,000 less people on furlough at the end of June than at the peak, fall of 44%. Interestingly, at the other end, information and communications take-up of furlough is not particularly high compared to other sectors, just 18%. But by the end of June, only 10% of the entire furloughed number, 20,000, have returned to work. So a slower return there. Overall, the rate of return from furlough is 24%, which you can see on that black line there in the chart. And so everything from property upwards is ahead of average. We explore this in more detail on our blog. So now I'm going to, I'll just talk a bit of background around the regional response tool and why we created it. As we see it, there are 5 key dimensions to the challenge. Obviously, there's a growing number of unemployed people that need to be supported back to work against a backdrop of a slowly re-emerging economy with a very varied picture in regards to what we're seeing within the economy, as we have done throughout this crisis. Some sectors are more able to get back up and running, and some, to be honest, have continued throughout this period, although they are smaller numbers. So obviously there's a need to support those people back to work and a need to quickly match displaced workers to employment opportunities. So we see as being key to a fast and quick recovery. We also recognise that there will be needs to upskill and retrain unemployed people that have been displaced to ensure they can access sustainable employment where there is growth within the local economy. Potential applications for the report. What we really want to be able to help you to understand is the local situation, and we want to be able to set a benchmark that can be monitored and reviewed on a monthly basis to see how recovery is materializing and how what changes we're seeing within the economy on a month-by-month basis. We can provide an evidence base through the tool which can help to inform planning and help you to target interventions, and those might be short, quick, sharp interventions, or they might be more long-term planning and longer scheduled interventions that need to be put in place. Obviously, through our job postings data, which is a key part of this, you're able to pinpoint who is hiring, identify employers, what roles and what skills are in demand. And then obviously there's an opportunity to map the gap between skills demand and the skill sets of displaced workers. Now I'm going to hand over to Martin, who's our account director, and he's going to take us through the report and how this can be used against what I've just set out.
Yes, thank you, Will. So yeah, this is the response tool as it stands in Analyst, the Emsi Analyst. And this is the initial settings page that you're looking at here. We've done a number of screenshots to recreate the response tool in this presentation. So to start, much like most of the other sort of reports in Analyst, you're able to select the regions. You also have an option here to select the occupation skill level. So what we've done is broken down the 9 major occupation groups into high, medium and low skilled occupations. And this can also help to sort of filter out and control the way that the information is displayed on some of these subsequent charts that you're going to look at. So next slide, please, Will. So once you've run the report, you're taken to this initial page. It's quite an extensive report. At the top of the report here, you've got a summary that highlights the highest and lowest changes in occupations according to the job postings and JSA claimant data. So what you have there is 4 different occupations, just highlighting the largest changes. So on the left-hand side there's job postings, greatest increases and the greatest decreases. And then on the right-hand side, JSA claimants, sort of decreases and increases there as well. You can also on the left-hand side adjust the time period at this point should you want to. As you scroll down the report, you're presented with a bubble chart. And this compares on the 2 different axes, the change in job postings with the change in JSA claimants. Each bubble on the chart is an occupation group, which I think is a 3-digit occupation. So on the x-axis, you've got the JSA claimant counts and whether they're falling or rising, and that's plotted against the job postings change, also whether that's falling or rising. And that results in 4 different quadrants. where sort of you've got rising claimants and rising demand, and the different variations or permutations thereof. Also, if you click your cursor onto any of the bubbles there, you can see the some brief headlines there in a pop-up box. In this example, we've got sales assistants, retail cashiers. So that's just a brief summary for each one of those bubbles. Beneath the chart, you've got a more comprehensive listing of every single occupation that's been plotted there, and that gives us the changes in job postings and JSA over the time period in a bit more detail.
So just to reiterate, the key data that we're using within this report currently are job seekers allowance claimant counts, because that can be mapped across to SOC or occupations data, and we're also looking at job postings, which again is mapped across to occupations data. Those are the two key data sets that we're using here.
Yeah, so staying with the sales and retail occupation example, so if you highlighted or clicked on one of those bubbles, that would then take you through to a more detailed report. So this occupation summary gives you some headlines there at the top there, some contextual information on the number of jobs in the most recent year. So that's looking at the historic sort of structural data that we have in analysts that goes up to 2019. And using that as the baseline. So yes, presenting the picture as was in jobs over a certain time period. The next table down is the inverse staffing pattern. So that gives you a sense of which industries have a demand or which are employing this particular occupation. Also, as you scroll down the report, you've then got compatible occupations, so compatible occupations to the sales occupations that you're looking at. The compatible occupations uses what we call ONET occupations, which are very similar, other than the fact you're able to break down ONET occupations into the key competencies. So that's breaking down the particular knowledge and skills associated with every occupation. And on that basis, you're then also able to not only compare, but produce an index score. So on the right-hand side there, you've got the compatibility index. So the higher the number, closer to 100, indicates that that's a pretty good match to the occupation that you're looking at. And to talk to Will's previous point about displaced or unemployed workers, you can use the compatible occupations to think about where those workers may go in terms of alternative occupations. And then finally, at the bottom of this summary report, you've got an indication as to the latest job postings. That's looking at the active job postings in the time periods presented. You can look at the latest postings according to either job titles, as we are here, or use occupations, companies, or skills by selecting one of the 4 tabs across the top there. So yeah, that's basically what you can do in the tool. So generally, the response report includes links to more detailed standard reports available in Analyst. So you can jump from any of these reports like compatible occupations or job postings table to then go to a more detailed analysis in those particular reports. So that's the response report as it stands. If you're a customer and would like a bit more information or an introduction or walkthrough of the tool with me, just get in touch with me. My details are at the end of the slide there. So now Will is going to show you a bit more about some of the new features that we're adding to the response report in the next iteration.
Thanks, Martin. That's really useful. Obviously, if you're not a customer and want to find out more about this, my contact details are at the end of the presentation, so do make contact. I thought it'd be useful to show you version 2 of the regional response tool, So this is where we're going with the tool, and this is based on feedback that we've had from existing customers and through work that we've been doing through our consultancy activity, specifically with helping organisations understand their exposure to the disruption caused by the coronavirus pandemic and the resulting lockdown. So you'll see here key differences are we're going to include details in regards to the full claimant count as a point of reference. We're still going to focus in on Jobseeker's allowance count, but the full claimant count will be there as a point of reference. What we will then do is we'll then, as we have looked at previously, look at occupations with the highest JSA increases, decreases. We'll look at job titles in terms of changes in postings and increases and decreases. And then what's really interesting here is we'll then be able to look by 4-digit occupation or industry. We're going to start looking at an exposure index. Now, the exposure index has been developed to reflect the extent of furlough in different industries, the need for physical proximity in jobs, and the key worker role, which means that some jobs carry on regardless of disruptions. And so, bearing that in mind, that gives us an index which we can then apply to occupations or industry. The other key metric that we're using is in regards to location quotient, which gives us an idea of the presence of those industries or occupations, and therefore we can filter by the presence of those industries or occupations and their exposure in regards to that index that's been recreated to understand the impact of disruptions caused by the pandemic. So that's all going to be updated and in the tool, and we're working towards that going live by the end of October. So not long to wait for that. As always, happy to take feedback on the current report and what would be useful. But with the only other thing I really wanted to point you in the direction of is that there are plenty of further resources that are available. I've already talked about the update on the response tool, but there's plenty of insightful and relevant articles, interactive data summarising the latest trends in regards to the pandemic within our blog on our Emsi website. We're also going to develop a new section on our website that explores local challenges and potential solutions relating to COVID-19. That should be launched in the next couple of weeks. Also encourage you all to register for our economic development newsletter, where we'll be providing updates and making you aware of future webinars and pointing you towards other content that we think will be useful. So I think that brings us to an end. Just want to thank everyone for attending. We will be responding to questions individually due to time. And thank you, Martin.
Thanks, Will.